All right, Tracy, how you doing today?
Good.
It's a beautiful, warm, sunny afternoon. We're here by the campfire, and this is always one of those things that sparks a lot of interesting, open conversations. I look forward to really seeing what you got to offer and how you can help us.
Okay.
So tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, I spent many, many years in business. I had my own business. I was in the marketing end of the world, database marketing. Then when I retired from that, I went into politics. I spent 10 years as a state rep. Uh, Also on my town planning board. I'm very active in my church. I've been the moderator of a congregational church for 37 years. Something to do. Uh, and then I decided to write a book. Actually, a second book. I wrote a book in 1986 about marketing, but it's kind of dull. If you're not into marketing, it's very dull. There's no plot at all. It's just process. But in a couple of years ago, I decided I've got a son-in-law who's an agnostic, and I felt like baby boomers. I think we dropped the ball somewhere, because if I look at my population of my church, there's a void of 40 and 50-year-olds. And I think we baby boomers relied on somebody else to take care of spiritual education. When we grew up, your community, your church, your school was all kind of tied together. Somewhere in the 70s, everything started to split apart. And I think that's when spirituality, or quote, and I'll use the word religion, started taking a back seat to a lot of other things. So I decided I'd write a book to try to get my son-in-law interested. He happens to be a big Apple products user. So I titled a book, Extreme Entrepreneurs, Steve Jobs and Jesus Christ. Looking at the entrepreneurial spirit of both. The idea is to tie man with spirituality. Steve Jobs himself was not a spiritual guy at all, but he did have a vision for helping consumers, even though he didn't like consumers. He liked when they liked his products, where Jesus just basically said, love your neighbor as yourself, and kind of upset the apple cart of fear, because in his era, fear was the currency of control. So I wrote the book, gave a copy to my son-in-law, never asked him about it. So he hasn't come forward yet. So I don't know if I achieved anything. But I had a publisher who said, do you have any more in there? And I said, well, yeah, because there's like a 4-step process, and I wrote a book on each step. The first one is having an idea. That's the entrepreneuring part. The next one is having the courage to keep your idea going. And I think that's, when I look at you, I think that's where you are. You've got the courage of your idea and your conviction to move it forward, and you're working it. The next book is called Nifty Neighbors. That one has to do with involving other people in your vision. And the fourth book was Consummate Coaches, because once you get to a certain point, you have to affect results through the efforts of others. As an entrepreneur, you can only have so many balls in the air. At some point, you're going to have, if your idea is going to grow, you're going to have to involve other people, and then you got to manage it. So that was the idea of the 4 books in a sequence. They all compare a person with Jesus. Obviously, I am a Christian, and right now we're just out in the marketplace trying to see if it's going to catch on, because there's a gap. I think Christianity has locked itself in its own buildings. We've turned church into Sunday morning. We turn beliefs into Sunday morning. And if you show up, then you believe, and if you don't, whatever. But I don't think that's the way. That's not the way that it is for me in the world. So, you know, you carry it in your soul, and if you don't develop your soul, then you're kind of stale. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
I hope you do. I feel like I should throw some more wood on the fire here because there's a lot to get into and talk about there. But I think some of the most important things that you touched on was the idea that, you can show up on Sunday morning or you can show up in the day-to-day world. But if you're not really practicing behind the scenes and you're not bringing your best authentic foot forward, you're wasting your time.
Yep.
And that's something I want to travel down because that's such an important part of the hero's journey. We all say we get to a point in life where this isn't working. We want to do something different. We want to take the reins, and stop letting other people dictate what things are going to be. We want to do it ourselves. But man, that's a hard concept to wrap your head around.
Well, as an interesting aside, that's where I'm living right now, because I'm not running for reelection. I finished 10 years in the House. I resigned. I didn't run again to be on the planning board. Um, I'm still involved with my church, but other than that, I'm carefree and looking for the next chapter. And I don't know what that next chapter is. So, I guess I got a few years to worry about it, but, I'm round in the last turn here. So it can't be a slow developing chapter. It has to be fairly rapid.
Yeah, but you know what though? When you put it in those kind of terms, it instantly brings to me the single most important piece of advice I've ever received. And that's when you're walking into the unknown and you're trying to put new words on a fresh piece of paper. Sometimes you don't need to know. You just got to enjoy the journey.
Yep.
It,
Yep.
again, one of those principles that it's easier said than done because it's scary to walk into the unknown. It's scary to get to a point along a trail when you're out hiking and you can't really see what's ahead of you. And 9 times out of 10, on those trails are not marked very well. You just got to go and hope for the best.
Yep.
And if you put that adventurous attitude and mindset behind it, it gives you the power to really own that adventure, make it yours, create that trail and blaze your way and have fun with it. And I think it's the fun and the adventure that really hook us and give us the fuel or the inspiration to take these journeys that really teach us that life is ours to live. We're the ones that create the story. We can't look at somebody else for all the different words and have them put them on the page. We've got to write that book ourselves.
Yeah. And the other variable that I have is every day Saturday.
I like that.
So,
Yeah, I really like the framework of the mindset that you're working with, is honestly from your background, you've got a lot of everything going on. You've been in a field where people are always picking at you, pushing you down, telling you what you can think and what you can do as far as the political avenue goes, because we all want what we're told the greater good is. But then you bring the spirituality aspect into it. And this is what really hooked me and brought me into the spiritual realm, period, is the fact that those are all contexts to draw inspiration from. They motivate you to live your life. And I think when you mess the two together, you get that carefree attitude of, I'm going to try these things. And if they fail, they fail. That's okay. I can pick myself up, dust myself off, learn the lessons, go back to the trailhead and start over again in a different direction.
That's an interesting observation because I was talking to a psychiatrist about this concept, and she said, "Well, the thing is, whatever avenue you take, you don't have to stay on it. You can try something, and if it doesn't work, you quit." I said, "Well, that's fairly true. You're not making a lifetime commitment anymore. You're making a commitment to this idea, and if it works out, that's good, and it'll take you to another idea." So that's it is a scary place to live, but it's also
It,
enjoyable.
it's got to be enjoyable. I like to really emphasize the tagline of adventure when I'm working with people because I get a lot of people that come to me that, they want to make the changes in their lives. They want to put whatever those things are that are hindering down. But when they do it by themselves, they get that momentum at first and then it dies out and they find themselves back doing those things because they're comfortable, and being caught up in that story of self-suffering means that you don't have to go out and try things. You can just sit in one place and let everything come to you and knock you down. But, when you really look at how that helps you write the story of your journey or leave something lasting behind, it the two don't correlate. So you really got to step out and embrace the adventure. You got to embrace the fun of things and not let everything feel so serious and mundane. Because really, whether we're talking about business or your daily life or the adventure of getting out on a trail, nothing's black and white. And nothing is that simple. You have to experience it in order to develop a vocabulary to understand it, process it, and then apply it.
Well, yeah, there's another wrinkle there too. For a while, I did commercial real estate and business brokering, and working with small business owners. Most of them are selling their business because they're sick of it. And I said, well, I understand that. But the one thing you have to decide is once you sell it, what are you going to do? I mean, I'm just saying, I'm not saying what are you going to do day to day to get up at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's what are you going to do with yourself? Do you have adventure that you just described in your being? And it's surprising. I wasn't trying to talk people out of selling their business because that's how I was making money. But it was surprising how many people didn't have any idea what they were going to do. I said, "What are you going to do? I give you a check for X amount of dollars, or you get a check today. What are you going to do tomorrow?" And they didn't have any answer. I mean, they didn't even say, "I'm looking for a new adventure." They just said, "I don't know." And I said, "Well, you got to think about that a little bit. Right now, you've got something that's supporting your lifestyle. Don't bail on it until you decide you're going to change your lifestyle."
I think that where this is going is one of the most important aspects that mindfulness has taught me is always being aware of what your options are and developing a backup plan and then a backup plan to that. And that way you're ensuring yourself not only multiple avenues for adventure, but you're also ensuring yourself multiple avenues should something go wrong. You've always got another plan. That way you're not just finding yourself stuck in limbo.
Yeah, that's true. But most people don't think like that. It's amazing how much tunnel vision there is. That never looked outside of their tunnel.
It's kind of funny thinking about it and as we progress through this and just how that comfort level within almost the robotic day-to-day kind of life, you get so caught up in that these subjects or these ideas that we're talking about, they seem so foreign. And I remember being caught up in that frame of mind, and when that normal path wasn't there anymore, the state of shock that it put me in. The fact that it took away my logical ability to make simple decisions, and ultimately, it just brought about a very dark way of life. But it also, I guess, ends up putting you in a position where you have to go out and seek like a new vocabulary to navigate your way through whatever lays ahead.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a line I used to do. I call it the chicken circuit, where you speak at business gatherings and stuff. And one of my favorite upsetting lines for people was, "If you are what you do, when you don't, you aren't." And I had more people come up to me afterward and say that again. And I said, "If you are what you do, when you don't, you aren't." Man, that upset a lot of people.
It's almost like one of those open-ended riddles that nobody wants to hear because it makes them think and have to reflect. Another good one is about knowing yourself, because no matter where you go, you're always going to be there. You know,
You're there
it's
first.
exactly. It's like when somebody says something like that to you, and you're caught up in the just the robotic aspect of life. You look at them almost like that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But then when
Right,
you go, it sticks with you, and when you start to really think about it later on, you're like, that is absolutely brilliant. I've never thought about the context like that being, I get up in the morning, I go to work, I chase all these shiny, bright things that distract me from knowing myself or building a character, building an identity. And then you come to a moment in life where all those shiny things are taken away from you,
hmm,
and it strips you of your self, of your sense of self. Really, you lose your worth, you lose your value, you lose your direction. And that question pops back up, or that statement pops back up. And it becomes that seed that makes you say, even though I've been going this path for so long and it got me to where I'm at now, I can actually reinvent the wheel or reinvent my mindset, and I can start to take off in a better direction that's going to be much more fulfilling. And it's going to give me autonomy and control over the course that I'm traveling.
true. And maybe it's time for a course correction.
It's one of those things that, you know, I discovered as I've been going through my journey that not only spending time within books, reading different philosophy books and different stories and journeys led me to podcasts, and that led me to begin dealing with different things that I've always masked and hid, namely in this venue, social anxiety, that overpowering fear of interacting with people. I never really had to put much thought into it when I was going through the robotic day-to-day life.
Right,
But to chart my course, I knew that I had to do it. So then I started reaching out to people and having conversations with them through the podcast, which for me personally, I've discovered was the best way to do it, because there was an expectation that I would hear at least an episode or two that a week that would feature me talking to somebody. And when that was something that was expected, that was something I knew I had to do in order to continue, progressing my project and everything like that.
right,
But then it catches on, and it becomes so much more, because then once you practice in the forum and you get comfortable with it, it becomes a part of your normal environment or your normal camp. And as you set up your survival camp in a way that affords you shelter, affords you fire, you're able to find food and eat, then you start venturing out looking for other tools and resources to maybe build a chair, Maybe have a signal fire ready for the day that somebody comes by or whatever the case may be. But all these scenarios get to the point that as we practice in life, as we take control over it, there's always another step. So it really eliminates a lot of the hopelessness that we get caught up in when we're going through the robotic aspect of life.
Hmm. That's true. Oh, yeah. Have a plan B and a plan C.
And then you leave plan D wide open for the unknown,
Right.
which is where I do a lot of my work around the idea of when we're out in the field, we craft, shelter, we craft different things and we do all these different routines and practices to learn how to utilize whatever the environment offers that you're standing in. So with the hope being that when you're back in the concrete world and things start to go wrong, you can look around you, you can see the resources that are there within the environment, and you can craft whatever those tools may be in order to get you through that challenge and into the next moment.
Hmm. So it's building up confidence in yourself.
Most definitely. I mean, losing my self worth and everything. Uniquely, I built that all back up with a hatchet in my hand.
Right.
And now being able to share that, just like you share your ideas and your perspective of doing the same thing through your book. The whole point is to inspire somebody to go out there and travel down these unknown paths and realize that regardless of what camp you're in, the overall theme is to live and experience and to enjoy, even to make mistakes, to fall on your face and get back up and try again.
Yep. And not to be a passive player. I think that's the biggest mistake because
That's right.
the constant change is the operative word for living. Things are always changing, and the people who are too passive uh, and don't involve themselves in their own life, they turn into deadwood because the world just changes and leaves them behind. I mean, I have to say I am not that flexible in the whole social media world. It just I haven't adopted it, and so that part of the world has changed. That I'm going to let it go by.
And that's that idea again of picking and choosing what it is that we're going to do.
Yeah,
I'm right there with you in that camp. I hate social media with a passion. I pretty much only utilize it for the fact that, it's part of the digital side of my project. So
right.
you got to embrace it for that. But outside of that, I mean, I tend to keep a lot of the apps and things like that off of my phone. And when I'm having my personal time and I'm not working, then that's what it is just to enjoy the actual world around me that I can see.
Yeah, I follow Facebook because that's how I find out what my son's doing.
And sometimes that's helpful. I mean, I do the same in order to keep track of what's going on in the world to make things relevant, but also with family and friends that I don't get the opportunity to see on a daily basis. At least this way we can correspond. And that I feel like that's a lot different than the way that social media is generally used in our culture today.
Right,
Because to get back to your point about being a passive player within your life and your story, it's just another avenue that people will utilize to continuously kick you down and use you as fuel for their story. So if you're not willing to stand up and take hold and take control over the things that you control that are around you, then the rest of the world has no problem swallowing you up for their story and letting your story just kind of fall by the wayside.
That's true. Well, that helps me justify my lack of interest.
Well, anything to help. I mean, you know, when I first got into doing anything that involved like any sort of promotion, back then it was simply putting together a music flyer and stapling it to a telephone pole. And that was how you got the word around. Now it's gotten so diverse and so out there that if you're it feels like you're not engaged with it on a 24-hour basis, you're just losing touch with the world around you. And in some ways, you're almost irrelevant. But if you're comfortable enough with yourself to realize that your point and your purpose and what you're doing is authentically from your heart, I feel like the rest of it just kind of comes in the way that it's supposed to, and everything eventually ends up playing out the way that it's intended.
Yep. Yep.
Which offers you the opportunity to offer yourself some grace. You give yourself some space from the digital world. You get out there and you reconnect with the world around you. And ultimately, I feel like that's a very grounding thing that helps you to eliminate that story of self suffering that's so easy to get caught up in. And you get to replace it with that hero's journey that we all desire to live.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, talk to me a little bit more about about the early challenges that you encountered throughout your journey as you were going through the political world and starting to gain momentum within that. How did that actually affect you mentally?
I'm sorry. How did?
So, in your early political days,
Yeah.
as you were starting to get things going and moving, talk to me a little bit about that, how that affected your mindset and the mental stage of where you were at, the struggles
Well,
and
it was definitely an adventure because I had not been a very political animal. And when I in New Hampshire, it's a 2-year term. So I was elected to my first 2-year term, and the New Hampshire House has 400 reps. It's a very, very large meeting room, so to speak. And I thought everybody was talking shorthand. I mean, it was like the adage of getting a drink of water out of a fire hose. I couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. And so I asked a senior player, this was about, I don't know, probably the start of the second year. I asked a senior individual, I said, how do you guys know all this stuff? And he said, we've been talking about the same topics for decades. So, it's a different wrinkle on the same debate. And we've had the same debates for decades. And he said, don't feel bad if you don't understand what's going on, because we do talk, and I use the term shorthand. He said, we do talk in clip terms because we all know the topic. So every 2-year term, I got a little better at it. In the last 4 years, I've been a chairman of a committee, so I kind of internalized what the hell was going on. And figured out there are a few topics, and they rehashed all the time. You get a whole bunch of silly stuff. I mean, I can't even think of some of them. But we had this last term 1,200 bills that we had to deal with in 2.5 months, and it's like it's impossible to understand all that and to read it all. So part of the whole political game, so to speak, when they talk about how the sausage is made, you have to figure out who you can trust and who shoots straight and who feeds you a bunch of malarkey and depend on people to know a topic that you're not that familiar with. So there's a lot of interdependence. But when I first ran, I said I'll do 5 terms, and I did my 5 terms. Obviously, they didn't want me to. They wanted me to run again, but I said I'll do 5 terms, and that's it. But it wasn't truly an education. You learn a lot of stuff about things you don't care about. You know, my first year, there was a debate on the House floor for an hour and 45 minutes about lead sinkers. And I thought, and I'm sitting there thinking, are we really talking about this for this long? You know, once it crept past an hour and we're still debating lead sinkers and loons eating the sinkers and dying, there's no cases of that, but it could happen. And I thought, well, let's talk about this a lot more, because I'm losing sleep about lead sinkers now. And that's the kind of silliness that you spend a lot of time on. For the conclusion was, we can't use lead sinkers anymore in New Hampshire. You have to use other materials. that was worth 400 people spending an hour and 45 minutes debating. So it's like, oh, I don't know. Maybe my priorities might be screwed up.
Well, it's definitely a very environmentally important subject. I mean, you know, a long time ago, we adapted that as far as waterfowling goes. We removed lead shot, replaced it with, you know, different metals
Right.
and that for the exact same reason.
Right.
So it was a matter of time before it caught on in the fishing community. And, you know, I love the fact that it has personally. I feel that it's actually a much better form of getting out and enjoying our hobbies and our passions and being able to take care of the environment at the same time.
Oh, yeah. And right now, I mean, this last term, everything is PFAS, PFAS this, PFAS that. And when you find out that PFAS is everywhere, because it's comes off of shingles, it comes off of siding, it's in the ground, you know, it's in our water, and nobody really knows what the long-term effect is, but everybody's running around like the sky is falling. It's like, well, I don't know how we clean that one up. We'll see.
Yeah, that's something that's been very prevalent in my area over the last few years, is the impact that it's having on the waterways. And you know, being a sportsman, you know, it kind of makes me think sometimes about why the fact we didn't actually take the time to study and learn about the long term effects of this stuff
Right.
before we actually introduced it into the marketplace.
Well, but that ship sailed.
That's long sailed. But you know, those are the kind of things that come to mind when you're out there and you're like, well, now I got to deal with this stupid adaptation because that person that came up with it got so money hungry they never thought about the long term effect,
Right.
or put the time in to actually do the research before saying, hey, I got this and let's run with it because it does this and that. And you know, to me personally, stewardship, it takes on two different meanings, because there's not only the environment, but there's also the personal aspect of it. And when you put the two of them together, it makes you stop and think a little bit harder before you jump to the quick answer of whatever it is that you're looking at, because there is unfortunately that, you know, there's that carrying capacity, and then it brings up that logical thought that for every action there's the repercussions. So what are those repercussions going to have? And I'm sure you guys spent a lot of time caught up on that part of it.
Yeah, but there's not a lot of on that topic. There's just not any research. That's unfortunate. The research is that it exists, and there's different versions, and it's growing. There's no real strategy on how to slow it down or purge, clean it up. I'll never see it. That's for sure.
I feel as if that's something that actually handling and taking care of is probably at least a couple of generations away from us
Yeah.
because it is such a mess.
Yeah. And I'm 77, so I'm rounding the bend on the last generation here.
No, I completely understand that. And again, I mean, it boils down to that idea of not only research and really grasping what we're up against, but also having that will and that ingenuity to take care of the problem instead of just constantly sweeping it under the rug. And, I think it gets back to the shininess of whatever the distraction is.
Right.
In the case of PFAS, it was the dollar bill. We all wanted to chase that. We didn't look at all the rest. Now we're all looking at each other, holding our thumbs, going, "There's a problem."
Yeah. Whose idea was this?
Right. Lots of finger pointing going on there.
Yeah.
Well, as the fire starts to wind down, I want to give you a couple of opportunities to go ahead and let people know how they can get in touch with you, get a hold of your books, and whatever else you got coming up.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. If you go to Amazon or on the online booksellers and look up my name, Tracy Emerick, it'll take you to the books. And if you want to get in touch with me, it's very complicated. It's tracyemerick@gmail.com. And I'm happy to respond if somebody has a question.
Well, Tracy, this has been a great conversation. Thank you. I love the opportunity that I got to sit down and get to know you a little bit. I don't believe in the words goodbye. So until we meet again, whether it's in this life or the next, I hope you have a safe travel.
And you too.